Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Grace Christian Family Center, and welcome to Wednesday night Bible study. Thank you for tuning in by either live streaming or by YouTube after the fact. So if you are watching tonight either by live streaming or YouTubing, you should know that tonight is part 2 of a 3-part seminar, a seminar for lovers and other married couples. A little tongue-in-cheek there. Not all married couples are lovers, and so that's why there's a little tongue-in-cheek on that title. But if you're watching by YouTube, after the fact, this is part 2. And if you want to catch part 1, either go to graceistheplace.com and look in the video archives there, or go to YouTube, and in the search bar on YouTube, type in Grace is the Place, all run together, one word, Grace is the Place, and then it will show you the videos available. And the first one, number 1, simply won't have number 1, I think. I think it's just called Lovers Seminar, and the unnumbered one is number 1. Tonight will be numbered number 2, and then next week will be numbered number 3. So after number 3, that's it. This is a 3-part session. So thank you for watching either live or by YouTube. We appreciate you tuning in. Grace Christian Family Center is in Tomball, Texas. My name is Danny Carpenter, and so we begin tonight the second part 2 of Lovers, which is basically just a seminar about married people. And the reason for the title was meant to be kind of funny. Lovers and other married couples, indicating every married couple is not really in love. And so hopefully we won't add to that number tonight. We won't cause any of you to fall out of love even worse than you already are. Our goal and our object is to try to encourage love and show you what the Bible teaches about marriage and that sort of thing. So tonight we're going to talk about, I'm going to show you a model in a moment, a paradigm, just a circle that I've drawn to illustrate a dynamic of the marriage relationship. And so we'll start tonight by saying that we only marry for one reason, really. Nobody ever married, I mean, they might have, but they were knuckleheads if they did. Nobody ever married by sitting down and having a conversation and saying, hey, I've always wanted to file taxes jointly, so why don't we get married? Or I've always wanted to argue over whether to have a dog or not with somebody, so let's marry so we can argue. Nobody's ever done that. The reason you marry is because you convince yourself that you're going to fulfill a part of you that's always been missing. There's something in you that yearns to be loved and to love. I think the greatest drive in the human heart is the desire to be loved. To love and be loved is kind of the essence of marriage. Nothing else really matters in marriage. If love's not there, it's a pitiful relationship. There's no denying it. But if love is there and we don't know how to define it, we don't know how to embrace it, we don't know how to create it, then the idea of this word we're starting with, intimacy, is missed. We start in the scripture, you know, the book of Genesis describes the creative story, and it's God created this on the first day, and God said it was good. If you follow the narrative in the book of Genesis, after each thing God did, the verse always wraps up something sort of like this: and the evening and the morning were the first day, and the evening and the morning were the second day and third day. And each time he created something, you'll also find a phrase that's kind of clever, and that is, and it was good. And he made this, and it was good. So the first time in the creative story in Genesis we see the phrase, it was not good, is actually when he created man. And he didn't say man was not good, although I've said that a time or two. He said he made man, and then he said, it is not good for man to be alone. And so he made the woman. So that description of the creation of man and woman leads us into this conclusion. Adam was not, quote, good, and we don't mean, good versus bad. We mean fulfilled. He was not finished. He was not finalized. Adam was not fulfilled alone. He was not fulfilled until God made him a helper fit for him, and that was Eve. So that tells us that he didn't make Eve to stand alone either. Eve was not complete until she found Adam. Adam was not complete until he found Eve, until God put them together. It is not to say that everybody has to get married and God's not happy if you're not married, or you're never going to be happy. That's not true at all. The Apostle Paul was the most prolific apostle, and he never married, and at one point even made a comment, I wish everybody was like me. And he was talking about marriage, would not get married. He made his case for that. He said, because everyone who is married seeks to please their spouse. A married man lives to please his wife, and God is second. Now, he didn't say it exactly that way, but that's the essence of the meaning of what he said, because that's why he followed it with, I wish everybody was like me. That way, in other words, they would only desire to please God. But when you're married, the way you please God is you got to please your wife. And the way she pleases God is she's got to please her husband. And so Paul viewed that as a little bit of a conflict for him, maybe not for everybody else, but for him. And so Paul was never married, certainly not incapable of finding happiness and fulfillment, just not going to find it through marriage. So if we crave intimacy, and that's the reason we get married, what happens? Where does it go? I was singing a hee-haw song a little earlier. Where? I could improvise. Where did it go? Why did it leave? We crave intimacy. We marry for intimacy. We only marry for that reason. We think we're going to be fulfilled, and then it doesn't always happen. Now, it does. I don't mean to, sound jaded about your marriages. I just mean the rate of divorce in America and the world suggests that you're not finding fulfillment in marriage, or there wouldn't be such an alarmingly high rate of a divorce. So we're going to talk about why we lose intimacy. If we have it in the beginning, we lose it. Why do we lose it? How do we restore it? And it's a G-rated seminar, so you don't have to worry if you got kids in front of the TV watching. Just hang on. We're talking about something that they'll have to cross a bridge over themselves one day in the future. Problem with intimacy, and the reason that we are often unfulfilled in marriage, our happiness fades, the joy of the relationship goes away, is very, very simple in my opinion. It's because we define intimacy differently. I used to do seminars 25 years ago around the country, around Texas especially, and on marriage. And after I did the first few, I started deciding, I realized I need more input from couples. And so I had to find a discreet way to put out a little questionnaire, no names, tell me how long you've been married, and then here's the list of questions if you've been married longer than 5 years, longer than 10 years, so on and so forth. And then I started putting out questions for the husband and the wife, no name, don't even know if they're together or not. I just want you to mix them up, fill them out discreetly, put them in a stack, give them back to me. The next morning, I would go through some of the responses and what have you. One of the things I discovered was I put a question on there at one point, and I just asked, how do you define intimacy? And the amazing thing, this will shock some of you, the amazing thing is that I could tell men were very easy. I'll be watching when they were filling out their questionnaires, and when we come to that question, men would be, and they're done. And women would write a book, and it would just keep going for a while sometimes. And so I amused myself in a hotel room at night reading the responses, all anonymous, no names, and it would be like, okay, man, sex, man, sex, man, sex, 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 loving sex. Oh, there's a man with an adjective. Hey, loving sex. And then women would be a man who is emotionally stable and who gives me an emotional strength and who compliments and who encourages me to do and it would just be like, okay, no man even understands any of that. And it's not that we're all crude and women are all refined. It's that we were made different on purpose. We complement whatever God made in Adam. God said he's not going to be good alone. He needs something. And so he didn't make her like him. He made her as a helper fit for him, which means he put some emptiness in her that, whether she liked it or not, would only be fulfilled by him. And that's supposed to be a constant magnet. We sometimes say, why do opposites attract? I don't know, but they do. Does that mean they make a good marriage? Not always. But I think even good marriages will sometimes have to say, hey, we're opposites, and that's what makes it cool. You hear enough, if you're a part of this church instead of live streaming or YouTube, you hear enough in this church of me wisecracking because I have the microphone and my wife can't. You hear enough of me wisecracking sometimes about her and some of the things that she does that I find humorous and frustrating and irritating. Just for an example, so you know we're not talking about deep things here. Things like, for the umpteen millionth time, getting in the car to go eat, where do you want to eat? And she always says the exact same thing. We've been doing this for 50 years now, and the exact same thing she always said, I don't care. And so then I would say, well, okay, let's go to Wendy's. No, not Wendy's. Let's go to Red Lobster. No, not Red Lobster. How about Chewy's? I had Mexican food for lunch. Well, then why don't you just tell me where we can go? Because I don't care. I don't understand that. And neither does any man in the world, unless he's sitting with his wife watching this and then he's saying, I don't get it. I don't get it. We never have that problem at all. Well, that's the kind of difference I'm talking about. I'm not talking about, he's a mudslinger and she likes perfume. I'm talking about our thinking, our reaction, our responses. We're just different. But that difference is really what makes a relationship engaging and fun and entertaining. I would hate to be married to someone like me. I'm very honest and forthright with that. I don't even like me sometimes. I would hate to be married to someone who thought exactly like I think, who feels exactly what I feel, who likes exactly what I like. I would really hate to be married to someone as cranky and ornery and condescending and mean and all those things that I am and can be. What I do like is that once in a while when she's having a bad day, I can offer a well-meaning and timely comment, not judgmental, not lecturing, just because I have a different perspective. I haven't been under the pressure she's been under the day. My problems have been different, and so I'm able to give a third party outside the fracas a different perspective that helps her get a balance and say, oh, I know. And the same thing with me. I can get angry about something. I can blow a gasket, and she can say, that's really not going to help anything. And if you just think about what they said, because she's not in my particular battle at the moment. That kind of compliment is what intimacy really is about, and it's also what leads to a development of greater intimacy in the marriage. So for this to work tonight, I'm going to give you my little cartoon. This is just a little thing I drew a long time ago to simply illustrate a dynamic in the principle of marriage. So I hope on your TV screen or computer, I hope that comes up right. And I can already tell from here it's not centered right, but it's going to get worse. Trust me, before we get through with these, because there's several of these. I'm going to define marriage as the outer circle. You see the yellow circle, the ivory colored circle. I'm going to define that one circle with immovable boundaries. That is your marriage. Your marriage is right there, that circle. And then I'm going to put this inner circle and label it the intimacy that all of us married for. There's a heart of marriage that we married for. And so I'm going to use this model now for a while to try to make a statement. Intimacy is that circle within the definition of marriage. So out there in that outer circle, now you get the idea where we're going to go with this for a little while. Those are the things in marriage, and just glancing at them, that this is just the tip of the iceberg. You have found many more things to discuss, debate, argue with, contend with, than just the things here. But that's marriage. Nobody sat down with me. I don't know about you, but nobody sat down with me before I got married and said, son, that would be my parents, or a friend, that would be a good friend. Nobody ever said, have you got a couple of hours we can just sit down and kind of advise you what marriage is going to be like? Nope, nobody did that. It was always funny and giddy and, is she hot? Oh, yeah, I guess. I don't know. Is she rich? Well, her daddy is. Nobody ever said, y'all probably not going to like the same kind of cars. And when you get married, you're going to probably have to sell one and just drive one. Because when we got married, she had a nice Oldsmobile 442 with a hot engine, and I had a Pontiac Grand Prix with a hot engine, not the doodly kind that came along in the 80s. I'm talking about a 1970 with a hood that reached Fort Worth from here, and a 444 barrel cubic inch engine under, and that thing would just purr like a cat at 75 miles an hour across the desert in Arizona. And we were both paying notes because she had a job and I had a job in Dallas, me, her, and Houston. And nobody said, you're probably not going to be able to afford both of those notes, and your insurance is going to go up. You do know when you're under 25, your insurance is going to go through the roof, and nobody had that conversation with me. There was no need to. We're going to get married. It's going to be fun. We're going to dream, and we're going to dream big, and we're going to probably own 4 businesses within 10 years, and we're going to have money running out our ears, and we're going to have friends everywhere, and we're going to eat ice cream if we want it, and nobody can tell us when to go to bed. We'll go when we feel like it, and we're going to love, 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 love. It's just going to be great. And then we got married, and we went to Dallas right after our wedding, went to Galveston for one night. That was our honeymoon, Galveston one night, in the old Flagship Hotel, since been torn down. And then we went to Dallas, and we went to work on Monday, and we had to suddenly start thinking about where to live because we had an apartment, and it'd been fine for me single, and now it's too noisy for her. People throwing parties right out there in the parking lot in front of our place. We had a drunk knock on the door one night at 2 o'clock in the morning. Want to know where John was? John. He want to know where John was? I said, John's in Magnolia. No, I didn't know where John was at the time. I finally got out of bed because she was traumatized. Somebody beat on our door. And I went to the door, and he was drunk, and I opened it with a little chain that wouldn't have held anything. And I said, man, there's no John here. I know John's in there. Come on, John. And I said, oh, John, he's 2 doors down. I don't know, John. I just want to get him out of my front door, the drunk. Shut the door. That's not too big a deal for me. I'd been to Vietnam. You understand, in Vietnam, everybody was smoking pot or taking speed or on heroin or drunk, and everybody had M16s and grenades and everything. And so that didn't bother me. I didn't know that would bother a woman. We can't live here anymore. Well, we can't afford to move. Well, we can. You just have to give up more stuff, and we can move. And so right off the bat, here you are. Where are you going to live? Where are you going to live if that one doesn't work out? What are you going to do for furniture in that house you finally buy? I didn't know how much taxes could cost me at the end of a year. I thought filing jointly was going to make them all go away. It didn't. And then you got bills and more credit card debts and furniture debts. And then you got to worry about, are we going to have children or not? Well, we might have them accidentally. What do you mean? I forgot to take, what? Oh my gosh. And we only got one car. We got a carpool. Don't worry, I'll catch the bus. I rode the bus. I carpooled, took the bus all the way to Love Field Airport, work in my engineering office there, catch the bus, go back over in town, ride with her back. Man, nobody told me that stuff. I just wanted to have all the money I needed, cool cars, go home to a cool house, and make love to my wife and be happy because we're just intimate. But marriage is full of all that stuff. And you're going to have to deal with your kids' education and kids when they come along, and religious differences and concepts and beliefs and taxes and insurance and taxes and insurance. And whether somebody sues you, which I've been sued 3 or 4 times in my lifetime by stupid people for stupid things. I mean, just really bump you in the freeway, and they fine on the freeway, and then a week later you get served because they got whiplash and they can't move. Well, it wasn't my fault. Somebody hit me, knocked me into your car. That one went away, but still it took 6 months for it to finally go away in the court. And it's a matter of perception. How does he perceive these things? How does she perceive? Some things weigh heavier on a man than they do on a woman. Some things weigh heavier on the woman than they do the man. Are you following me? That's marriage. Marriage is rough. It is. And then there's this intimacy in the middle, and that's the area you can't let any of that stuff get in it. Because the minute that stuff gets in there, then it just disappears and you have no intimacy. That is only kept alive if you can deal with all that other stuff of marriage and still come together in a loving union without complaining, bickering, fighting, blaming, fussing, and so on and so forth. And so I'm going to give you a simple dynamic now. Here's Marriage 101 by Carpenter. If you make the intimacy really, really big in your marriage, you hardly notice the other stuff. You can't hardly read any of that. It's still there. Got to take care of it, but it's carefully tucked out of sight behind the fact that you just love so much. However, conversely, if you start losing intimacy because you're fighting so much about all that stuff, after a while, you have more fighting than you do loving. You have more argument, more bickering than you do loving. And so this is what we're going to do tonight. We're going to let Scripture talk to us briefly. 1 Corinthians, the 7th chapter, verse 3, Paul the apostle writes, "Let the husband render unto the wife due benevolence, and likewise also the wife unto the husband. The wife has not power of her own body, but the husband, and likewise also the husband has not power of his own body, but the wife. Defraud you not one the other, except it be with consent for a time, that you may give yourselves to fasting and prayer, and come together again, that Satan tempt you not for your incontinency." I think I started to rewrite that here, and then here maybe is even better. But let's stay right here because I want to show you that divided line in a minute. I think I missed the first verse on this one. "Let the husband give to the wife what she had a right to expect. And likewise, let the wife give to the husband what he had a right to expect." When you got married, you had a right to expect intimacy by your definition. We hadn't got to the definitions yet. And then verse 4, "The wife yields her power over her body to her husband, and likewise also the husband yields his power over his body to his wife." Verse 5, "Do not withhold from each what he or she had a right to expect, unless you do so with mutual consent, that you may give yourself to a time of prayer or spiritual purposes, fasting. And then restore your intimacy, so that Satan cannot tempt you, since you lack self-control." Now, the apostle didn't say, but if you're not making it work, well, then you just buckle down and you exercise self-control. He didn't say that. He said you lack self-control. And because you lack it, if you don't maintain that right level of love in your marriage, then Satan will enter the picture and you lack self-control. So once he enters the picture, you're in trouble. So now look at the difference in the picture here. Men define intimacy, remember, as a physical thing, and women define it as an emotional security and an emotional bond from the man. You see the difference in the picture here, and that's critical for you to look at in conjunction with verse 5. "Do not withhold from each what he or she has a right to expect." King James says, "Do not defraud." Defraud's a good word. I'll use it instead of what I have here. Defraud means don't cheat. Do not cheat your wife out of what she had a right to expect. Do not cheat your husband out of what he had a right to expect. And here's the rub. Look at the graphic on your screen and get this concept before we move to the next screen. He doesn't define that inner circle the same way she does. He defines it as something physical. She defines it as something more emotional and physical. The emotions aren't quite the same. Doesn't mean he doesn't love. It means that he is driven with a physical desire and passion. David, the king of Israel, is a classic example of that. I don't know how many wives David had. He had a bunch. I don't even know if the scripture names all of them, but it names several. And yet one day David looks out the window of an upper window of the palace, and he looks down over the village, and over there on a rooftop, a woman has her maid and her bathtub on top of her house, and she is bathing with the assistance of her maid, her handmaid. And David, the king, with multiple wives, sees that woman, and he wants what he sees. He's not aroused by what he sees to the extent that he says, hey, Clyde, I don't know if his guys were named Clyde or not, but it would be good. You know, never mind. I was going to tell you about another song, but we'll leave that out. So he could have said, God, go get and named one of his wives. Go get her and bring her up. If David knew which one would be more likely to be inclined to be summoned. So he could have just said to one of his men, go get her, tell her to come upstairs. And then he wouldn't have, if he admitted to her, he'd been an idiot. So he couldn't say, I saw a woman bathing naked and it really got me going. He would just have to say, oh, just, sitting here eating peanut butter thinking what a wonderful day it would be if one of my wives was up here, whatever. But get the point here. David wanted what he saw, not just amused and aroused by it. So that opens up this can of worms for us men. Men are sight motivated and sight driven. Men are turned on by what they can visually see as well as what they physically touch. One of the differences in men and women. Why is pornography predominantly a male problem in the world and in America? Because women aren't really turned on by hairy, sweaty, naked men. But men don't really care what they look like as long as they're visually gone naked. I'm just going to say naked. Men are sight motivated. Women are passion, feelings motivated. A woman needs to feel that she's loved, and she needs to love the man that she wants to be intimate with. A man can just be intimate because he's turned on by what he saw or what he felt. Now, that's not an indictment against men, nor praise for women. That is my stressing to you that you're different, and you're different by design. So, and it's imperative you get that because we're fixing to explore that inner circle right there. Remember the first model I showed you a minute ago? If you could make that inner circle this big, it would be great. Well, how can you make it that big? Well, here's the rub. His half of that circle is different from her half of that circle, and the only way either one of you will ever succeed in making that marriage gratifying, fulfilling, is if you understand his and her expectations are so uniquely different that we're going to start with he for a moment, that he cannot increase the size of intimacy in the marriage by putting his foot down and demanding that she give him more. That's not the way it works. But he might increase the intensity or the numerical count, but he hadn't intensified love, because somewhere there's a resentful person having to accommodate an arrogant and condescending man. The only way a man can increase that circle is to increase her half of it. Let the husband gratify his wife in the way she had a right to expect. And her expectation was not his. So he can only focus on what does my wife want, what did she need, what did she think was going to happen when we married, what did she think I was going to provide for her, what need did she think I was going to shore up and prop up, what does she want from me? And it doesn't matter what it is. His obligation is to provide it. It can be as simple as I will say this and hope that it's, I didn't ask my wife permission, and so I hope it's all right. But when we were 38 years old when I just decided we can't resolve some of our differences, our conflicts. And we were both raised in a church where you kind of didn't go to counselors, you just prayed, and God would just help you work through things. And so we'd pray, and we were both very good Christian people praying, but then it didn't resolve our particular issues and conflicts. So at 38 years old, for the first time in our lives, I came in one day and said, let's go talk to a marriage counselor. And we weren't talking about divorce. We weren't about to split. We just needed some resolutions from an outside party. And we went to a counselor, God bless him, a sweet man. And he didn't listen to anything I said. I love him. He's passed away now, so I can talk about him. He didn't listen to anything I said. All he did was listen to her. And when he got through, he looked over at me and said, you know, when I was about your age, I had a midlife crisis too. And I said, I'm not having a midlife crisis, sir. You know what I did? You're not listening. You know what I did when I had one? Shut up. No, I'm telling you, when I had a midlife, oh my word, my wife thought I was crazy. I went out and took flying lessons. I bought a motorcycle. And so I let him talk. He didn't listen to me. You know what I did the next week? Went out and bought a motorcycle. Yes, I did. I'm not lying. I rode it in my garage. I'm so proud of it. Let's see what she says. The counselor said he bought one. Let's just see what. She came home, saw the motorcycle, said, don't you ever put one of our kids on that motorcycle. I bought it on Monday. I sold it on Friday. Tells you who wore the pants in the family. And then I thought, well, okay, that's strike one. He also said he took flying lessons. I went out to Hook Airport, went down to United Rentals, started taking lessons, flying little Cessna 150s and 172s, I think is what they were called. They had the back seat on them. And so I came in and announced, I'm taking flying lessons. And she's, oh. There was no like, oh, that's good for you, dear. Like, oh. So back to the counselor we go. Now I can shut him up. I bought a motorcycle. She said, sell it. I sold it. I'm taking flying lessons. We still aren't making it work. Now listen to me. And so we were able, over the next few months, we were able to get some direction, some genuine direction that kind of helped turn things around for us. And it came just like this. He asked us at one point, said, I'm just, you know, y'all got so much going for you, I'm just perplexed. I'll tell you what, why don't you just write the things you wish he did different than she does, and you write the things you wish he did different than he does? And I said, okay, and I got my pencil, and I wrote, it's like that thing I told you about in my seminars a few years ago. I wrote. I was through in about 3 minutes. Yeah, that's about it. And I looked over, she's still writing. She's on number one. Well, I got to write a few more. I had to make up stuff. I don't know. Takes too long fixing her hair. That's something. She's still writing. She wrote forever. Oh, my word. I think he had to interrupt her. That's not exactly true. But she did write a lot more than I did. And because she took him seriously, I didn't. I wasn't complaining about much. One of the things that she mentioned on there had nothing to do with what you're thinking of intimacy. She said, well, he never helps in the kitchen ever. My daddy cooked a lot. Growing up, I grew up in a house where mom and dad both were in the kitchen. They both cooked. My dad cooked different things than she did. He liked gamey stuff, squirrel brains and stuff. But he never helps in the kitchen. She's right. I didn't cook. I didn't wash a dish. I was lucky, she is lucky, if I picked up my glass and took it to the kitchen. I figure a good fairy will come get it off the coffee table, take it to the kitchen and wash it. It'll be in the cupboard when I need a glass, because the fairies come in the house and do that. Never paid attention to the fact that that was a chore. Of course, she's working as many hours as I'm working. And so a few other things on there like that. And so thanks to good guidance and a good man with a good heart and a good ear after we got past the first flaw, the first bad meeting, midlife crisis, I started trying to understand the necessity of, I can't look at that circle and say, well, her half's got to look just like mine. No, it doesn't. And And now, if we went to a counselor now at our ripe old age, I hope she's watching. If we went to a counselor now and the counselor said, just write the things on there that you wish she would change and he would change, I would just write number one for about an hour and a half. I cook, I cook, I cook, I cook, I cook, I cook. She doesn't. I cook, cook, cook. I clean, and she, it's not exactly that bad. The other side of that coin is I did start cooking. It wasn't good. She had to eat it because she was trying to be respectful. And there were a few times even I finally said, don't eat that. Let's throw it in the trash and go eat something at the hamburger joint. And she'd never even been on a date to McDonald's until I took her when I bummed a dinner one night and messed it up. Now here we are all these years later. That was 30-something years ago, 34. And now I do cook most of the meals we eat at home. I actually enjoy cooking. But we have our staples. We got to have, I can't tell you what they are because you would turn your nose, oh my God, I can't believe they eat that. Sauerkraut weenies. But we do have our staples. We eat something, we'll eat the same meal about 2 nights a week because we just like it. And then I'll experiment now and then on various other things. I rub it in now and then. Remember when you used to make turkey and dressing? It was a week-long event. I made turkey and dressing one evening in an hour. That's right. I bought the pre-cooked turkey breast at the store. I brought the pre-cooked cornbread at the store. I came home, threw 3 pieces of toast in, got the eggs out, got the sage and the celery and chicken, all that stuff, and I mixed it all up, and I made a dressing and threw it in the oven. And an hour later, we had turkey and cranberry sauce and dressing and potato salad. It's so good. You know what happened when I started cooking years ago, just trying to accommodate a struggling marriage? Unbeknownst to me, I was making that half of the circle bigger. That half was increasing over something as simple and silly as cooking and cleaning up my messes. And then I got to the place where right now, honestly, she tries to cook now and then. I'll give her credit for that. And I would go in and say, what are you doing in my kitchen? And she'd say, I'm going to make her something. No, you're not. Get out. Get. And I'm serious. I don't want her in there. I want to make it. I want to make it all. Last night I cooked, you'd be proud, I cooked pork chops, boiled potatoes with butter just dripping off of them. And then I had a cabbage, and when I cut into the cabbage, it was diseased all the way through. And so I had to throw it in the trash and look in the pantry, and the only thing we had canned in the pantry was cream corn. So we had cream corn, potatoes, and pork chops. It doesn't go, I know, but we also had a fresh tomato. Now you say, what's all that got to do with any of this? I don't even think about it anymore. But every time that happens, I'm expanding a circle, a half a circle. It's not mine, it's hers. It's got nothing to do with my definition of intimacy. It's got to do with respect and cooperation and participation and love and harmony and agreement, and not dumping my life and my burden and my chores and feed me and take care of me. It's being independent to the extent that nobody has to take care of your particular needs. You just do what. You ever think sometimes you ought to just look at your spouse once in a while without telling them you're thinking about it, and you ought to just think, what would I do if they weren't here? Well, one day they're not going to be. But I think about that at my age now. I realize I have less to live than I've already lived. And so one day they're not going to be there. I don't want her to wake up one day and say, I don't know what to do. And I don't want to wake up and say, I don't know what to do. And so we just get to a place where we start realizing nobody should be taking care of you. You should respect the other person enough that everything is shared and everything is joint. When it is, what's happening indirectly is you're expanding half of a circle you can't even see. You don't even know what's going on. And the converse side of that is then you get this reciprocation, this payback, this idea of, I know what he likes, I know what he wants, I know what he thinks. He's been awfully good to me. I'm same scripture, I'm obligated. Let her, in the way she had a right to expect was him, and likewise let her gratify him in the way he had a right to expect. Not her way. His circle isn't increased because you cook dinner nice, but that's not it. It's different, and you know that it's different. So when each is fulfilling the other, the problems of life are still there. You still have all these problems. You can see the edge of them sticking out there. They're all still there. You're going to have to file your taxes. You're going to have to pay your bills. You're going to have to worry about the kids, where they go to school. You're going to have to worry about everybody's safety nowadays. All those things are still there, and they never go away. They never are supposed to go away. But amazingly, when we are absolutely gratifying and fulfilling each other in love, all those things we have to do diminish in their power to break us, power to separate us, power to cause arguments. They diminish so greatly that after a while you realize you don't have to argue over them anymore, because the bond of intimacy has already been forged. I wisecrack a lot about marriage now because it's safe to do so. It wasn't 35 years ago, but it's safe now. And you've heard me say, I know sometimes some of the wisecracks I'll make sound like I'm just trying to be funny or make up something. It's really not. Like one time, for instance, we were going to eat. This classic thing: where do you want to eat? I don't care. I know you do care. Well, I really don't. Why don't you pick tonight? And I say, I want to fight. Just yelled it in the car. Said, what is wrong with you? Now, when you're young, it'd be, what's wrong? It'd be like, what is wrong with you? It's like, are you insane? We haven't had an argument. I can't remember the last argument. How long's it been since we argued, Sandra? I don't know. Why? I want one. I want an argument. Let's fight about something. We hadn't fought about anything in years. I want to fight about something. Let's fight about, I know you don't like Red Lobster all the time. I want to go there tonight. Let's fight about it. I don't care. Let's go. I'll eat shrimp. It's good. No, you say you don't want to go. Say it. Want to fight. I couldn't make her fight me. We tried. I tried. I wanted to know what an argument felt like. It's been so long, literally, genuinely, since we had an argument. But the reason is because when you give up your rights and you simply decide, I'm going to try to see if I can make that half, the other half of the circle, I'm going to try to make it as good as I can make the other half of it. I want to be, I've told couples trying to decide whether they're going to divorce or not, and they'll come sometimes to see me and talk about a few verses, and then it'll just be like, I don't see how we can stay together, I don't whatever. And he wants me to tell her something to change and be what he wants you to be, and vice versa. She wants me to put him in his place. And I have just said to everybody, to both husband and wife, a number of times over the years, the best advice I can give anybody is be a loving husband or wife. Be a loving husband and wife. Be a loving, do you know how hard it is to walk out on someone who is loving you, who's not ready to fight you every time you open a door? A genuinely loving person who is trying to expand the other half of that circle, a man who's really trying to gratify his wife and be a loving man to her, is hard to walk out on. And a woman who quits saying, you made a vow, you promised, so the vows mean nothing. What about the kids? It's not, I didn't marry you for kids or vows or pieces of paper. I married you for you. And a woman who doesn't use leverage in battles, but just loves a man and expands that part of the circle, it's hard to walk off from a man or a woman who is genuinely showing love to each other. The smaller that circle, remember, when we're not fulfilling either half of that circle, then all those things dominate and we'll wind up fighting and arguing about them even more. Greater problem of no intimacy is found in verse 5. Go to verse 5. Do not withhold from each what he or she had a right to expect, lest you do it with mutual consent for a time of spiritual purposes, and then restore intimacy so that, I put it in yellow so you can see the last part of the verse. Here's one of the great dangers to a married couple that we just don't acknowledge sometimes. If we fail to get this concept of expanding the intimacy from her point and his point, then the lack of restoring that intimacy into our marriage opens the door for Satan. Lest Satan tempts you for your lack of self-control, the Bible says. So when we're not fulfilling each other, we open the door for a temptation of a different sort. That's a really terrible graphic. I couldn't decide what to draw there, so I'm sorry for that. But it's like, let me try to explain one more time. Look at this verse so you get it. You see the bottom there? Satan is, the name is thrown in there, so make sure you get this. Now, I don't know about you, but I have a really hard time fighting my flesh. My flesh is tough. It's mean, it's ornery, it's selfish, it's demanding, it wants its way, it lusts after what it shouldn't have, it's greedy. That's my flesh. I have to bring it under subjection to the Spirit, pray for God for strength in His Spirit. Just fill me with your Spirit so I can overcome the flesh. And the Bible doesn't say that's a sin. The Bible says every man is tempted when he's drawn away of his own lust. And then, and that's not sin yet. And he says, and then when lust conceives, it brings forth sin. And so that's lust. That's the flesh. Every man is tempted when he's drawn away of his own flesh. And then when you step over and say, I'll tell you what, I won't, I'm tired of this. She doesn't know. I'm just not going to stay home tonight. I'm going to do what I want to. What happens is that's just flesh. That's just flesh. You're just battling your flesh all the time in marriage. Your flesh wants to cheat or be fulfilled no matter the cost or price. Punish somebody who's not making you happy and all the other silly things. That's all flesh. But look, did you see the verse? One more time. Let me go back to it. In this area, when you do not give to your spouse what they had a right to expect from you, you actually create a chink in the armor. You open the door in that marriage and you allow a spiritual force to come in there above and beyond your own flesh and lust. You got it? It's imperative that you get this. What does it mean then when Satan enters the realm of the marriage? It means we've ignored our biblical warnings to do it right by each other. Deny yourself, benefit her. Deny yourself, benefit him. Increase that half. You render to him, you render to her what they had a right to expect, and you've ignored it. You know it's there, you read it. I've taught it in seminars for 25 years or more, and yet we just ignore it because our feelings get hurt and we're not going to put up with it, and you don't understand me and you're not listening to me, and so on and so forth. Number two, then we have knowingly risked satanic intrusion. When you know that verse is there and you are willing to gamble and say, I'm not going to be humble, I'm not going to humble myself, I'm going to demand, you risk knowing, when you know that Satan can get involved, then you're intentionally and knowingly risking his intrusion into your marriage. Number three, you are then subject to the consequential reactions of Satan's involvement. Number four says our flesh temptation is now fed by Satan's opportunities. Let me tell you what I've seen over and over for the last 50 years of pastoring and being a minister. It's one thing when couples have trouble and they're fighting their flesh and their anger and their pride and their lack of being fulfilled. But it's another thing when they deliberately, intentionally say, I'm done with you. We need a trial separation for a while and I'm going to go my way and whatever. Because when they refuse to acknowledge that they need to increase the intimacy for their spouse and their partner, Satan enters the picture in such unique and mysterious ways. I have known men, in fact, I will tell you, I can't either because it's live streaming, so I can't. And I don't want it on YouTube. Let me just say that someone I knew very, very well decided that his wife wasn't fulfilling him. And he had a family, great family, and kids, several kids. And he just decided that she would never understand him. But he met a woman in a store. He met a woman working in a store who just said all the right stuff, and she just floated his boat. And they decided to get something to drink after she got off work. And that was the beginning of the end for him. And I talked to him one time when I didn't know it at first. It took a long time before I knew something was not quite right. In fact, his wife even came to me once and said, I know he's one of your best friends. Will you please tell me what's going on? And I said, I don't know. I really didn't know. And so when I found out what was going on, I talked to him a little bit, and here's what amazed me. He said, now this is his thinking, so let me try to put it in the right frame of mind for you. He said, I had worked with my wife. I'd talked to her, I'd begged her, I'd said this, we'd argued over that. Nothing ever got through to her. And so I just quit. I'm telling you, there's no hope there. And then right after I finally say, I'm done with that, I walk into this store, and this woman, she's so beautiful, and she came up to me, and she said this and complimented that, and I just knew, I felt that chemistry. Man, it was like, good Lord, where you been all my life? Somebody I could just relax and talk to. So I never had that kind of conversation with my wife and all our marriage. And when we met that evening, I just knew, man, I just knew. And I said, did it ever enter your mind that this might not be chemistry or your soulmate? Did it ever cross your mind that you'd flirted with women before and they wouldn't give you the time of day? They look at you like you're an old pervert or something? And now you've walked out of your wife for a while for cooling off time, and you walk into a clothing store and a woman just suddenly you got chemistry. Did it ever enter your brain? You know where I'm going with this. It's on the screen on your TV. Did it ever enter your brain that Satan might have entered the picture? It's one thing for you to turn your head and lust over somebody at a red light, sir. But what makes her turn her head back and look and then not look away? And you say, want something to drink? And she said, who pulled her strings? Who's taking advantage of your vulnerability and gullibility? When we defraud our spouses, we are crossing a line God never wanted us to cross, because He created marriage as a model dynamic of His relationship with us. We are the bride of Christ. He is the bridegroom, and He meant for our marriages to reflect the values that He has toward us. And He is always fulfilling us. And we might not think the same thing about what we do toward God. We spend a lot of time complaining in our prayer. Well, why don't you do this? Please, God, do this. And He just keeps expanding our half of the circle. And what He wants back is our praise, our loyalty, our honor, our faithfulness. And then when we violate the kingdom principle of marriage, and we do not seek anymore to fulfill as He didn't seek to fulfill her anymore. He was only angry because He wasn't being fulfilled. And the minute he walked off from her and meets a woman, and that woman, she didn't love him. She lied to him. She told him she wasn't married. Turned out to be married. She was married to a very well-off man right here in Houston. And he began a life of just a horrible life after that. He thought that she was the one. He wanted to marry her. He finally filed for divorce. He got messed up on drugs with her. And just last year, he literally took his own life out of depression and despair. He had been helped by friends in the rehab facilities at least twice that I know of, and just his whole life. You know, I don't want to say anything presumptuous about it, but I don't want you to miss this verse either. We're talking about what it means when this verse right here comes to pass. If you don't come back and restore that intimacy, and you walk away from your obligation to a spouse, you open the door for Satan to tempt you, because you already lack self-control. You're not going to suddenly have it because you walk away from God's plan. What you're going to discover is you've walked into a world that you have no control over. Satan has control over his kingdom. All right, let me start wrapping up here. Here's some verses that apply only to husbands on the left and only to wives on the right. Husbands, love your wife as Christ loved the church. Husbands, love your wife as you love your own body. Husbands, be understanding, show honor as to a weaker vessel. You can write those verses down or pause it on your screen and write them down. On the right side, wife verses. Ask your husband at home if you want to know something. That's keeping communication open, giving him respect and value for what he is. He's a problem solver usually. He's a fixer. He's a protector and provider. Communication is vital and critical so he doesn't make a fool of himself. Number 2, submit to your husband. I like that. It's repeated in 3 places. Ephesians 5:22, 24, Colossians 3:18. Check them out. Oh, finally we get down here. Love your husband. Well, phooey. He has to love her a lot, even like Christ loved the church and gave himself up for the church. So the husband has to give up his rights and his ideals and his feelings and his needs and his demands in order to fulfill hers. And he has to gamble doing that, believing that he married the right kind of person and it will come back to him in days to come. And now look at these verses right here. In Matthew, the 19th chapter, he answered and said to them, have you not read that he which made them at the beginning made them male and female? And he said, for this cause shall a man leave his father and his mother, and shall cleave to his wife, and they twain two shall be one flesh. Wherefore they are no more two, but one flesh. What God therefore has joined together, let not man put asunder. And they said unto him, well, why did Moses then command to give a writing of divorcement and put her away? And he said to them, Moses, because of the hardness of your hearts, suffered you to put away your wives. But from the beginning it was not so. And I say unto you, whosoever shall put away his wife, except it be for fornication, and shall marry another, commits adultery. And whoso marries her which is put away does commit adultery. His disciples said to him, well then, if the case of the man be so with his wife, it is good not to marry. Why would anybody get married? Well, Jesus is not exactly stating what he knows the law teaches, and Paul clarifies it in Paul's writing that divorce and remarriage is not a sin. He said it clearly, and if thou marry, thou hast not sinned. So here's what gets missed if we're not careful. You see the verse there where he said, Moses, because of the hardness of your heart, suffered you to put away your wives. A Jewish rabbi in Humble told me years ago, many years ago, I met him. In fact, I rented a building from him, and he was a super nice guy, and he was a rabbi of the temple in Humble at that time. And we were discussing Scripture one time, Old Testament, some New Testament verses, which he doesn't use or believe in. And we were discussing those verses, and I said, well, the New Testament does go back to something I don't understand. He talks about Moses being allowing divorce among people when it was, like weird. And then for hardness of their heart, which I thought meant rebellion. And I said, God never tolerated rebellion, so why would he do it for that? And the rabbi clarified my brain. He said, no. Moses is right. God winked at ignorance. At times, the Bible says, there's a verse, God winked at this ignorance in the New Testament. You should know that, Pastor. I do. But there's never a verse where he said, and he winked at rebellion. God always judged rebellion. So that word cannot be a synonym for rebellion. He did not say, therefore, Moses, because of the rebellion of your heart, suffered you to be put away. So what he meant was exactly what he said, the hardness. So here's what the rabbi explained to me. In Moses' time and in Christ's time, arranged marriages were common. Love and kindness were often absent from the marriage. That's true even in King David's marriages. He didn't marry women because he loved them. He married them because he was king, and he killed her husband, so he took a man out of obligation, or he seduced one, he took her in and had her husband killed, or they were spoils of war, the prince's wives of countries he destroyed and killed the prince, and David got the wives, and a number of wives are named. They were not love wives. Even Michal, that Saul's daughter that David won by defeating Goliath, didn't win her right then, but she was his. Even she wound up marrying someone else later, and somewhere after many, many wars, David wanted Michal brought back to him, and she and her husband broke their hearts because she didn't love him and didn't want to have to come back to the palace and live as his wife. And so here's Moses. So many marriages were arranged without intimacy, no love, no kindness, hardness of the heart, not rebellion of the heart, hardness of the heart. And so here is God looking down on a marriage arranged, knowing that that woman will never in her life know what it's like to be loved. She will always feel used as an object of a man's gratification. She'll basically be his slave to only please him and do whatever he wants. and her heart will never know what it's like to love and be loved back. That's hard. That's hardness of the heart. He got a woman by winning a prize. She didn't want him. Solomon, the book of Solomon is written about a Shulamite slave girl that the king with 700 wives became so enamored with her. She was so beautiful, he just had to have her. Only problem was she didn't want the king. She had a shepherd lover from back home. He came to Jerusalem, climbed up ladder somewhere and saw her through the grove, and her heart just melted. And she described him so well to the ladies of the court who were grooming her to get her ready to be queen to the king. And she described her shepherd lover so well. When she got through, there's a soliloquy in there where they said, tell us where you last saw him that we may help you find him. Wonderful symbolism in that. She didn't want to marry a man because she was beautiful and going to be his prize catch. She wanted a shepherd boy from back home who she knew loved her, just like she was. And this is what Jesus was referring to with Moses' law. Moses permitted divorce not because people were too rebellious to obey laws. He'd have just had them executed. Moses permitted divorce because too many marriages existed without intimacy. No love. Not enough love in the man's heart to fulfill his wife her way. Not enough love in her heart to fulfill her husband his way. That was the drawback. That was the hardness of the heart that was permitted. Divorce was permitted for. So I hope you benefited in some way from this. You can rewind it sometime, look at those models and the dynamic, and remind yourself, the diagrams, and remind yourself of how easy it can be to simply expand that inner circle of intimacy, but you can only do it one way. No man, no woman can ever demand that their half be fulfilled and get it. You can only increase the other person's half of that circle. God bless you. Thank you for watching tonight. Thank you for being here. And we'll see you next Wednesday night at 7 o'clock for part 3. Thank you.